Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive.
Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today I have a very special guest. Frank Iglesias is a seasoned real estate entrepreneur with experience in hundreds of deals across various exit strategies. Known for his solutions-oriented approach, Frank has consistently created successful outcomes for all parties, even in seemingly impossible situations. Since 2008, he has built his businesses through strong business relationships and has hosted numerous real estate meetings on residential investing. As a coach, Frank leverages his extensive experience to help other investors achieve success in their own projects. With a tenacious and persevering mindset, he believes that every challenge presents an opportunity for growth. Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Before we get into what you do now, tell us how you got here. Are you from a family of entrepreneurs? Are you the first? Where does that spirit come from?
We are the first generation. It's me and my sibling, but no, our family is not an entrepreneurial family. It was very much blue collar type jobs in prior generations, some pastoral work in the ministry side of things, but no, we're blazing the path, as they say.
Yeah. Do you think that's what led you to where you're at? Is were you reacting sort of in a contrarian way and wanted to separate yourself, or?
No, we just wanted to do real estate. We were in the corporate world. My partner / sibling, she was in property management, so she kind of was seeing some of it. I actually came from corporate IT, so I was a computer guy. And I got introduced to this thing called real estate investing through Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Through a seminar that I wish I could remember how I got notified of the seminar, but I got the email, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, and it just, a light bulb clicked like, I've never heard anything like this before. Let's investigate.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. A lot of people, I have tried to do business with family members and learned my lesson. Not doing it again. You're a business partner with your sister. What do you say to people like me that say don't do that? And maybe there's some tips and tricks that we just don't know about.
Well, it obviously starts with a good relationship before you go into business. And I think one of the things that helped us is we're separated by a decade. So, a lot of sibling, and I have kids, right? Like, my kids get along pretty well, but we've all seen those instances where the kids are right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of the separation, we just never really had some of those things that create conflicts. So I think that just sort of made it easy. And that's a hypothesis. I don't know. Like, I've never gone out and statistically seen if you're X number of years apart, it works better. I have no idea.
And how many years? Sorry. How many years are you guys apart?
We're a decade.
A decade. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So we've just never had those issues. So it's always been a good relationship, even back to when I remember being a teenager, and she's effectively, barely elementary school. I still remember playing with my sister as a kid, right? And, and so it's just always been a good relationship. So I think what I would say, though, as far as a tip to helping people in that space, you got to come at it first from the position of your family first. And no matter, and if we can't get along in business, we can't let it impact family. I've done business with friends, and I tell them, look, if we're going to do this, we need to understand up front, if there's a tension we're not comfortable with, or we're not going to agree, we've got to be okay with just parting ways, because the relationship is more important than the business. And what I've learned is if we don't set that parameter down up front, and I haven't experienced it with family, but I have experienced it with a friend, then that does, right? Because then, people go into fear mode and just crazy things happen.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. I'm curious also, though, about the roles. Is it is there a leader? Is there a follower in your guys' relationship? Are you both equal leaders? Because if I think about me trying to work with one of my family members, I think that's the issue I've run into every time is it's like the folks I've tried to work with they don't realize and they just can't accept that like, well, Lance knows more about this and is more experienced and we want to join with him, but we just can't follow his lead. We just can't get there. How's your dynamic?
So it's really complementary, just like a business partnership. There are certain things she's really good at that I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't have the patience or whatever it might be. But then there's things that I'm very good at that she's like, you know what, you deal with that. And when we get to this phase of the project, I'll take it, I'll take the lead. And so it's very much a complementary relationship, which I think is good for any business partnership, right? I think we've seen that over and over with business partnerships is when there's that complementary, if I can talk today, set of skills between two people that really maximizes the impact.
Gotcha. I would agree with that. That's how my business partner and I work in that kind of a way. So did she attend the seminar with you, Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Or was it you that was only attending? Because what I'm getting at is like, that sounded like that seminar gave you the courage to step out, become the real estate entrepreneur you are today.
So it was really a combination of events. And as best I can remember it, I went to the initial seminar, but she was actually buying a foreclosed home.
Oh.
So it's like we were doing two different things, but kind of fell in the same bucket, which then led us to together going to a 3-day seminar. So we each had an individual thing, but then we attended the 3-day together. And then, and at that point, we're like, okay, yeah, we could figure this out.
Yeah, I love that. If we have a lot of millennials, Gen Z that listen to this show, and if they are paying attention to the media and externalities, they're probably hearing like a lot of negativity in terms of them never being able to get into the real estate market. So what kind of advice would you give them? Because I don't believe it's true either. What kind of advice would you give folks like that who want to get into real estate investing? Where do they find the money? How does it start?
Oh, well, there's a lot there. So when I talk to people that are getting into real estate investing, I always tell them, first, make sure you know why you're getting into it. It's easy to watch the TV shows, and don't get me wrong, the shows are cool, they're fun, but at the end of the day, it's entertainment. And what happens in real life is much more difficult. And so, I tell people, what is it you really want? Well, most people tend to say, I'm looking for financial freedom. I'm looking for generational wealth. I'm looking to leave my full-time job. Things that really paint a picture of recurring income on the long term so that they free up their time. That's a very different route from a more active investing, which is the fixing and the flipping and the wholesaling and building houses from the ground up. So it's really identifying, are you just looking for the passive income side? Or do you really want to have your hands in the trenches, really getting involved with creating, which is really more of a creator type role. And the people that are more creative types, they love the flipping, right? Because they're literally taking, whether it's pre-existing or brand new, they are creating something. But a lot of people don't want to put that kind of work in, or they don't want the risk, because there's a lot more risk in that side of it.
Right.
Versus, hey, I'm just looking for the passive income. That's a whole different route with its own set of options. So it really starts with, what is it you really want? Because if you just say real estate investing, it's too broad. We gotta drill that down a bit more.
But okay, I'll focus my question further then. So they still have to buy the property. How do they get the money? How do they find the money to do real estate investing in any parameter that you just described when it comes down to the purchase?
Okay. Yeah, so it depends. Like if they're the hustling mentality, they can be a wholesaler, at which point they don't really need very much money. They can have a few bucks for marketing. They could do a lot of networking. There's plenty of people that start wholesaling with literally zero. But think of it like this: the less money you have in that space, the more hustle you have to have.
Sure.
Right? So if you got nothing, all you've got is effort, and you got to be matched out on that. If you're going to fix and flip properties, right, there's plenty of hard money lenders and so forth that, I'll do you a common formula is start with a small project and put 10% down. And then the lender will fund the 90% plus the rehab. So if you start with an inexpensive property, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It might be as little as less than 10 grand, quite frankly, in a lot of places in the United States. So in that scenario, it could be savings. Don't really want to put it on a credit card cash advance, but let's be real, some people do that sort of thing. It could be, you might have money in a CD. Some people pull from an IRA, 401k. They might borrow with family. You might partner with family or a friend. You might do private capital with, someone you've known for 15, 20 years. So there's a number of options out there, but the key is to start small. And if you're going to buy a rental, it's kind of the same thing. Usually, depending on how you structure it, you may have to put a little bit more down. Those guys like to see 20, 25% down. And of course, there's always bank financing. And if you have a full-time job, my suggestion, if you have a full-time job, bank financing is going to be your cheapest money, because they want to see that W-2 income.
Yeah.
And if you have that option, leverage it until you can't. That was a mistake. We did some, back when I started, I had a full-time job. I got bored with IT, so I left. But in retrospect, I was like, I didn't max out that. I kind of wish I had, because that's really the cheapest money you're probably not finding.
Yeah. What about mentors? How does that enter into the realm of, if folks are looking to get started in this business? Maybe you could. Did you find a mentor right away? Should somebody find a coach or a mentor?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of mentoring, coaching. Business is a full contact sport. Real estate is very much a full contact sport. And as we know, in any sport, there are coaches. Whether you're, starting in Little League or you're Michael Jordan, there was a coach. And business really is no different. Real estate is a sport where what you don't know can and will likely hurt you. Mm-hmm. And because you're playing in a sport with several zeros in the numbers, you don't want to be taking those kinds of hits if you can afford it, right? And that's really the purpose of a good coach. I tell people we've been at this 16 years, and there was approximately a 2 to 3 year span where we didn't have a coach. And that's when all the mistakes happened. Oh, and they were painful. So we learned the hard way to never do business without that coach. Now, you don't just go get anybody. If you're going to be a fix and flip person, get somebody that's well-versed in that space. If you're going to be a rental person, get someone well-versed in that space. But when you hire a coach, there is something you want to make sure. You want to make sure they've had success, but you also want to make sure they've seen a few dark moments. Because if you get a coach who's never walked through a dark time, how are they going to help you if you get in a pickle? And the reality is, if you're in investing, the pickle will come. It's just a matter of when. Yeah,
I love that. That's maybe a question to ask them exactly. It's like, talk about their worst experience, problems they've had. It can't just be all the successes. I really like that piece for sure. What do you think then what do you think is the best way to make money right now in real estate today, with today's environment, high interest rates, possible tariffs, all of these sort of factors that we're factoring in?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's a lot of concern because the tariffs absolutely can impact what we're doing. The reality is they all work. It's just, it really comes down to how well you negotiate. If you want to reduce risk the most, you wholesale. But that's, again, a lot of hustle. But there's very, very little risk in that world. Very, very little. You get into rentals, there's some risk, right? Because you could always get the crazy tenant. And if you want to get into fix and flip, it'll still work. It always works. You can always find a house cheap enough to fix to sell at a price that's profitable. Those will never disappear.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this really comes down to the ability to negotiate. And what's interesting about negotiation is, if you go travel abroad, I remember going to South Africa several years ago, and they would haggle hard at, the street vendor shop over like a scarf or something. And it's like, oh, they want $20 and you're like offering 10, and you'll spend 5 minutes talking about $10. And they'll work it, right? Like they have that mentality. We don't tend to do that as much here in the States. People get annoyed, they get frustrated. But in reality, you kind of have to think a lot like what I learned overseas, which you just stick with that negotiation and keep pushing, because that's how the really good deals get done. It's very rare. I'm not to say it doesn't happen. Unicorns happen every day. But the reality is the odds that you're just going to find a good deal are very low.
Right.
The odds that you'll find an opportunity that you can create into a deal, that's much higher.
Yeah. One thing that I think a lot of folks have right away when they try to get into this business, I've seen it over and over and over again, is friends I'm a real estate developer, and so they'll want to get into it. I've done fix and flips, the whole thing. And they'll see me on social media, be posting about success stories and stuff, and then they'll want to get into it, and they'll take a class, then they'll find a coach, and then they'll start looking at the finances, and they end up with analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. Why, there's a certain level of knowledge that, like, in the exploratory zone of this time of it, that gives people that. What do you have any tips for overcoming that?
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because, if we overgeneralize this a little bit, you have left brainers, very analytical, right brainers, more emotional. Right brainers, you kind of want them to slow down a little and analyze more. Left brainers, which is what I am, we tend to spend too much time. It's like, dude, just pull the trigger, right? So there is a healthy balance in there. There is a healthy balance, and it's understanding up front. Look, it is literally impossible to account for everything.
Yeah.
You got to start there. And I think that's if you don't accept that, you're going down the road of analysis paralysis real fast. But the problem is that's exactly what a lot of people do in my experience. You try to cover for everything, and you just have to understand it's not going to happen. So you have to say to yourself, have I thought through everything that I can reasonably think of? And it has to be reasonable. Like, you can't sit there and say, well, you know what, a meteor could hit from outer space that all the scientists didn't pick up yesterday and we're all dead. Like, we're not talking about that. That's not reasonable. Like, did we think about, okay, this could happen, okay, do my numbers then account for this risk? And if the numbers account for the risk, then say, okay, then I can reasonably move forward and say, we've done the best we can with what we know. We feel comfortable, but we also understand something could happen the very day after closing that you might have to adjust. And I've had that. We once sold a house, and the following day, the sewer line had a problem. It was one of the few things we didn't change because it was running fine until it wasn't. Technically, we weren't responsible to fix it, but you know what? It was literally the day after closing. We came back, we took care of it, no problem. But you just got to know. Once you understand, I can't account for everything, but I can account for what I know to the best of my ability, then it's much easier to proceed. It's just going to be hard if you don't accept that.
Yeah, I agreed exactly. The known is always going to be unknown. The unknown is always going to be unknown. I mean, there's going to be you can't know it all 100%. How do you identify if an investment is good or not? If there some certain metrics you're looking at?
Yeah, at this point, it's all formula driven. And what we do in our formulas, so when I learned real estate, there was this rule, and I'm sure you've heard it, 70% minus repairs equals, and all this. ARV times 70% minus repairs, maximum. The reality is when I got into construction, in particular new construction, I learned that formula is severely flawed. And to the point where we just don't use it anymore. What we started looking at was, you know what? After you do a bunch of deals, we said, hey, where do we want to be? We want to walk away with 10% net on a deal. Not gross, net. So a lot of people confuse the two.
Yeah.
And it said 10% net and ideally worst case net. And then we put in, and so we now just plug numbers into formulas that account for all the realistic expenses. And that's T. So these are all the things we can expect. Now, you know what? And this is a true story, if our car hits a generator that knocks out power in the street and causes a short in one of my properties that caused me to spend $1,000 on the electrician, right? Like, okay, it is what it is, right? So that's enough. So we're not putting that in the formula. We'll have a contingency, but again, we understand these are the numbers. This makes sense. There's a certain amount of risk captured in these formulas, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So we just have to be okay with that. But in doing this, what it's allowed us to do, one of my coaching students put it best because he wanted to build houses. He said, Frank, when I started looking at all the deals through your formula, 90% of what I was looking at doesn't make sense. I said, exactly. That's the problem. It's easy to buy a real estate deal. It's not easy to buy a good deal. Right? Like there's plenty of investments available right now, but there's not plenty of good ones. There's plenty of opportunities that need to be negotiated. That's what they are. So you need good metrics. That's what we use. We just use real world metrics, real world calculations, real world costs. And I'll add one more thing, because if you got flippers listening to this, it's not just what you might hear on social media, the gurus, the this course, that it's what are those numbers in your market?
Bingo.
Because we're in different markets, we have different numbers for different places. It's very important.
Yeah. We're running up on the half hour here, Frank. Your advice and insight has been really invaluable. I got two questions I ask every guest. And the first one is, knowing what you know now, and if you could go back in time to when you first started your career in the real estate industry, what is one piece of advice you give your former self?
Don't be fearful. Understand that risk is real. You can't eliminate it, but you can manage it. And manage it from a healthy place. Because if you assess risk from fear, you're basically screwed. You have to assess risk from a healthy place, be reasonable so that you don't fall into analysis paralysis, but you are fairly and reasonably assessing risk. I'm glad that you asked that earlier in this chat, because that was one of the big challenges early on when we done the fix and flip. No doubt our analysis paralysis, and I say ours, it was more me than my sister,
Sure.
Definitely kept us from doing some deals that would have worked out.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that skill personally.
Yeah, of course. I love that humility. Frank, you've been fantastic. Last one is, where can people follow you if they want to get in touch with your coaching services?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways to find me. I'm on all the social media channels, so you can always message me on all your typical ones: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so forth. But my website, frankiglesias.com. You can call our office, 678-408-2228, or you can contact us through there. So if you Google my name, real estate investor, there's all of those venues will find me for sure. I will say I'm on Facebook the most. That'll probably be the easiest way, is Facebook.
Yeah, I just looked up Frank myself on LinkedIn. I'm going to send him a connection message. I hope you guys will reach out to him too. Frank, thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance.